The bell above the door of Marigold Diner rang with a thin metallic chime that Angelica Reyes could identify even in her sleep. It was 2:12 a.m., the hour when the world peeled back its mask. Truckers, insomniacs, men avoiding home, women pretending they weren't. Angelica wiped down the counter with slow, precise movements. She always moved precisely. Precision conserved energy. Energy was currency. Her apron pocket held $43 in tips. Her rent required $300 by Friday. Her brother Mateo's community college tuition notice was folded in her locker. Her father's name, the one she no longer used, was still tied to debts that crawled like mold through the city's underground economy. She refilled a coffee cup without spilling a drop. "You never sleep?" Earl the trucker asked from booth 4. "Sleeping is for people who aren't late on bills," she replied gently. He chuckled. She smiled. The smile was habit. Angelica Reyes had mastered invisibility. She spoke 4 languages fluently: Spanish, English, Italian, and conversational Polish picked up from the kitchen staff. She could calculate percentage discrepancies in receipts faster than the manager. She noticed when regulars developed tremors before they admitted to Parkinson's. She saw everything, and no one saw her. That was her power. The door opened again, the bell rang, and the diner shifted. Conversations thinned, chairs straightened, eyes dropped. 3 men entered. Dark suits, immaculate posture, silent. At the center stood Thomas Vercetti. He did not radiate chaos. He radiated control. Tall, tailored coat, dark hair combed back, eyes steel gray and unreadable. Angelica didn't look up immediately. Power enjoyed being acknowledged. She denied him that satisfaction for 3 full seconds. Then she met his gaze and held it. The air tightened. He approached the counter. "Angelica Reyes," he said. Her name, spoken evenly. She set the coffee pot down. "Yes?" He studied her face, as if verifying a photograph in his mind. "You're off in 10 minutes," he said. Not a question. She raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember sharing my schedule." "You didn't." Behind him, one of his men placed a slim leather folder on the counter. Angelica didn't open it. She didn't need to. She had seen that folder before. Loan contracts, debt transfers, collateral. "I'm here to make you an offer," Thomas said. The room held its breath. "I don't accept offers while on shift," Angelica replied calmly. "It confuses payroll." One of the men behind him stiffened at her tone. Thomas did not. In fact, something flickered behind his eyes. "Interest. My mother is dying," he said. "Direct. Efficient." Angelica waited. "She has heart failure. The doctors estimate 6 months. She wants to see me settled. Engaged." Silence stretched. "And?" she asked. "And I require someone respectable. Uncomplicated. Intelligent enough to understand discretion." She folded her hands on the counter. "And you think that's me?" "I know it's you." He opened the leather folder and slid a document toward her. Mateo Reyes, outstanding student debt. Apartment lease, 2 months overdue. Medical bill, her own, from 2 years ago when she'd fainted from exhaustion. Angelica's pulse did not change, but her vision sharpened. "You've done your homework," she said softly. "I always do." "And what's the exchange rate for my dignity?" He didn't flinch. "You move into my estate. You present yourself as my fiancée. You assist with my mother's care. When she passes, you leave with compensation. Your brother's education is secured. Your housing stabilized. And if I say no?" He met her eyes. "You walk away. And the debts?" A pause. They become someone else's responsibility. Not a threat, a reality. Angelica leaned back slightly. "You assume I'm desperate. I assume you're practical." There was no arrogance in his tone, no seduction, only calculation. She had dealt with men who believed money erased morality. Thomas did not seem to believe that. He seemed to believe in transactions. "I have conditions," she said. One of his men shifted again. Thomas raised a hand, slightly silencing him. Name them. You provide full medical transparency regarding your mother. I review medication logs personally. I do not play nurse blindly. You have medical training? 2 years of nursing school before tuition ran out. His gaze sharpened. You didn't list that on your employment records. My employer didn't ask. A small pause. You don't raise your voice at my brother, she continued. You don't leverage him to control me. Thomas's jaw tightened. Not in anger, but in thought. Agreed. And if I find something morally wrong inside your house, she added, voice quiet, I act. That depends, he replied. No, she corrected. It doesn't. Silence. The diner air felt electric. Then something unexpected happened. Thomas nodded. Agreed. Her breath didn't hitch, but something shifted inside her. He extended his hand. Angelica stared at it. This hand had likely ordered violence, signed contracts, moved millions. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, not crushing, not possessive. Finish your shift, he said. I always do. He turned to leave. The bell rang again as the door closed behind him. The diner exhaled. Earl leaned forward. Who was that? Angelica picked up the coffee pot. Temporary employment, she said. But as she refilled cups and wiped counters, she felt it. The axis of her life had tilted. She had not chosen power. She had chosen responsibility. And responsibility in dangerous houses could cost more than money. Outside, Thomas sat in the back of the black sedan. Luca, his driver and longtime lieutenant, glanced at him in the rearview mirror. You're certain about her? Thomas's gaze lingered on the diner window where Angelica moved efficiently between tables. She didn't ask for more money, he said. She set terms. Luca frowned slightly. She's a waitress. Thomas's voice was quiet. No, he said. She's not. He watched as Angelica helped an elderly customer count exact change. Invisible. Precise. Composed. She's the only one who didn't look afraid. Luca nodded slowly. And if she becomes a problem? Thomas's eyes remained on her. She won't. But he wasn't certain why he believed that. Only that he did. Inside the diner, Angelica clocked out. She removed her apron, folded it neatly, then stepped outside into the cold night air. The black sedan waited. She paused only once, looking back at the neon sign of Marigold Diner. It buzzed faintly. Familiar. Safe. Then she walked toward the car. Not because she craved power, not because she wanted wealth, but because silence in the face of corruption had once cost her mother's life in a hospital room, where no one checked the chart carefully enough. If there was sickness in that house, she would not ignore it. Invisible did not mean powerless, and Thomas Vercetti had just invited invisible power into his fortress. The gates opened without a sound. Angelica noticed that first. Not the iron, not the armed guards, not the cameras tucked into stone pillars like unblinking eyes. Silence. Money liked quiet. Power liked invisibility. The Vercetti estate rose ahead of her. Not a mansion, not quite a palace. It was something older in spirit. Stone, glass, dark lines cut with architectural precision. Floodlights illuminated its facade, but the interior windows glowed dimly, as if the house preferred shadow. The car rolled forward slowly. Angelica kept her hands folded in her lap. She did not fidget. She did not gape. Thomas noticed. You're not impressed, he said, without looking at her. I've cleaned houses bigger than this, she replied. That made him glance over. You've cleaned houses? Rich families shed more mess than poor ones, she said calmly. It's just better hidden. A corner of his mouth twitched. Luca parked near the main entrance. 2 guards stepped forward immediately. They nodded to Thomas. Their eyes slid to Angelica, assessing. She stepped out on her own. The night air felt heavier here. The front doors opened before they reached them. A woman stood in the threshold. Late 50s. Perfect posture. Black silk uniform tailored precisely. Hair pulled into a severe knot. Her eyes were cool and observant. "This is Marta," Thomas said. "Head of household operations. Not maid. Not servant. Operations." Marta inclined her head slightly. "So this is the fiancé," she said. Her gaze moved from Angelica's shoes to her face, cataloging every detail. Angelica met her stare without hostility. "Good evening," she said politely. Marta's lips curved, not into a smile. "We were not informed she would be modest." Angelica did not look down at her simple coat. "Modesty saves time," she replied. A beat. Thomas stepped inside. "Mother is awake?" "For now," Marta said. "She refused her evening sedative." "Why?" "She claimed it made her feel confused." Angelica's attention sharpened. Thomas didn't show reaction. "Prepare tea," he ordered. Marta turned smoothly and disappeared down the corridor. Angelica followed Thomas through the entry hall. Marble floors, high ceilings, portraits, lining the walls, men in suits, stern expressions, old-world authority. The Vercetti lineage. A family that had survived prohibition, political crackdowns, economic crashes. A family built on discipline and fear. They climbed the staircase. But something inside her tightened. The rhythm was irregular in a specific pattern, not random arrhythmia. She released Elena's wrist gently. "Tea might be better once it cools," Angelica said softly. Marta's eyes flickered. "Stay," Elena ordered. Marta hesitated. Thomas's gaze moved to Marta. "Leave us." The door closed. Angelica didn't speak immediately. She adjusted Elena's pillows slightly, elevating her shoulders. "Do you feel dizzy?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," Elena admitted, "and confused." "How long?" Elena's eyes shifted slightly. "Since the dosage was increased." Thomas stiffened. "Increased?" Marta had not mentioned that. Angelica kept her voice neutral. "When?" "2 weeks ago," Elena whispered. "Doctor said it was necessary." Angelica stepped back. "May I review the medication logs?" Thomas nodded immediately. He crossed the room, retrieved a leather-bound folder from the side table, and handed it to her. Angelica flipped pages calmly. Dates. Times. Dosages. Her eyes moved quickly. She found it. 3 weeks ago, dosage increased from 0.125 to 0.25 milligrams. That could still be within safe range. But Elena's symptoms suggested cumulative toxicity. "Has blood work been repeated since the increase?" Angelica asked. Thomas looked uncertain. "I'll confirm," he said. Angelica closed the folder. She did not accuse. Not yet. "I'd like to observe tomorrow's administration personally," she said. Marta re-entered at that moment. Angelica didn't miss the slight tension in her shoulders. "Anything else?" Marta asked. "Yes," Thomas said. "Angelica will review medications from now on." Marta's eyes hardened. Just briefly. "As you wish." Later that night, Angelica was shown to a guest room down the hall from Thomas's. Separate rooms, formal arrangement. She closed the door behind her and stood still. She listened. Footsteps in corridor. Distant murmur of staff. Air conditioning hum. She walked slowly around the room. Desk, wardrobe, mirror. Then she looked up. Corner molding. Small dark lens. Camera. Of course. She sat on the edge of the bed. If Thomas suspected her, he would watch. If someone else feared exposure, they would watch. Good. Let them. She removed her shoes. Then, very deliberately, she pulled from her bag a small, worn medical notebook. She opened it and began writing observations. Pulse irregular, possible digoxin toxicity, confusion episodes, post-dose increase, dizziness. She paused. The faintest scent lingered in her memory from the tea tray. Bitter, metallic. She closed her eyes, replaying it. Something was wrong. She didn't yet know what, but she knew this. Silence had killed her mother. A mislabeled IV. An ignored complaint. A nurse too tired to double check. Angelica would not repeat that mistake. Across the estate, in a secure basement room lined with monitors, Thomas stood watching one particular screen. Angelica's room. He watched her write in a notebook, not snooping, not exploring, not texting secrets. Writing, calculating. Luca stood beside him. You think she suspects something? Luca asked. Thomas didn't answer immediately. She noticed the dosage increase, he said finally. And? And she didn't accuse. He watched as Angelica closed the notebook and lay back fully clothed. She's not here for money, Thomas murmured. Then why? Upstairs, Angelica lay awake. She stared at the ceiling, counted breaths. Then she heard something. A soft click. A door down the hall. She sat up quietly and moved to her own door. She opened it slightly. Marta stood outside Elena's room, speaking on a phone, voice low. Angelica couldn't hear words, but she saw something else. Marta's posture, not deferential, not careful, confident, predatory. Angelica closed her door softly. She leaned back against it. The house was not just sick, it was rotting from inside, and she had stepped directly into its center. Invisible power had entered the house of wolves, and one of the wolves was smiling. Morning arrived quietly at the Vercetti estate. Too quietly. Angelica had grown up in apartments where mornings were loud. Neighbors arguing, buses grinding past cracked windows, radios humming in kitchens. Here, the air felt padded, controlled. She dressed in the simple navy dress Marta had left folded on the chair outside her door. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. The house had measured her the moment she stepped inside. She braided her hair back tightly. No loose strands, no distractions. Then she walked down the corridor toward Elena's suite. The door was slightly ajar. Voices inside. Marta's tone was low, but sharpened. The new dosage is stabilizing her. A male voice responded, unfamiliar. Yes, but we must avoid excess. Toxicity would raise suspicion. Angelica's pulse slowed deliberately. She did not enter. She memorized the cadence of the man's voice. Italian accent, Southern. Naples? Perhaps? She knocked. The voices stopped. Enter, Marta called smoothly. Angelica stepped inside. Elena was propped upright, pale but alert. A man in a gray suit stood near the window holding a leather briefcase. Dr. Romano, Marta said coolly. This is Angelica. Angelica inclined her head. Doctor? His smile was polite but thin. So you are the fiancée. So I've been told. He did not laugh. Angelica approached the bedside. May I review the medication schedule? She asked evenly. Marta answered before the doctor could. It's already been handled. I'd still like to review it. A pause. Thomas entered the room at that moment. He looked between them once. Let her review, he said. Not loud, not angry. Final. Marta handed Angelica the chart. Angelica read carefully. Digoxin 0.25 milligrams, morning. Furosemide, unchanged. Beta blocker, unchanged. Sedative, nightly. She turned to Elena. Any nausea? She asked gently. Elena hesitated. Sometimes. Visual disturbances? A flicker in Elena's eyes. Yes. The doctor cleared his throat. These are common symptoms of heart failure. Angelica met his gaze. They're also common symptoms of digoxin toxicity. Silence. Thomas's eyes moved slowly toward the doctor. Dr. Romano's smile thinned further. We monitor serum levels. When was the last lab draw? Angelica asked. 2 weeks ago. Before or after dosage increase? Another silence. Thomas's jaw tightened. Angelica closed the folder gently. I'd like updated labs today. Dr. Romano stiffened. That may not be necessary. Thomas stepped forward slightly. It is now. The doctor gave a short nod. Very well. He gathered his briefcase and exited without another word. Marta remained still. Her eyes locked with Angelica's. It was no longer a polite exchange. It was recognition. You see me, and I see you. The blood draw happened that afternoon. Angelica insisted on being present. She watched the vial fill, watched it labeled, watched the courier take it. Thomas said nothing during the process. But he did not leave the room. When the door finally closed, he turned to Angelica. You believe someone is harming her. It was not an accusation. It was curiosity. Angelica chose her words carefully. I believe her symptoms do not match stable heart failure. And if you're wrong, I apologize. And if you're right, she met his gaze steadily. Then someone in this house is committing murder. The word hung between them. Murder. Thomas did not react outwardly, but something in his eyes shifted. Not disbelief. Calculation. Who? He asked. I don't know yet. But you suspect. Yes, say it. Angelica held his stare. Marta. Thomas exhaled slowly. She has served this family for 30 years. Length of service doesn't erase motive. And what motive would she have? Power, money, loyalty to someone else. He studied her. You speak as if you've seen this before. I've seen quiet corruption, she replied. It always starts with someone believing no one will question them. Silence. Thomas stepped closer. You realize if you're wrong, this accusation damages trust permanently. Yes. And if you're right, then your mother lives. There was no flirtation, no heat, only truth. Finally, Thomas nodded. I will have the labs expedited, and I need access to camera feeds, Angelica added. His brow lifted. You think someone is manipulating more than medication? I think someone is comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes, she said softly. Thomas studied her face. Then he did something unexpected. He handed her a small security badge. Basement level. Surveillance room. She blinked once. You trust me with that? I'm choosing to. Power kneeling to truth. Not yet fully, but beginning. That evening, Angelica sat in the surveillance room beside Thomas. Monitors glowed softly. Hallways. Kitchen. Grounds. Elena's room. Marta moving with efficiency through corridors. Angelica replayed footage from the previous week. Fast forward. Pause. Rewind. There. 3 nights ago. Marta entering Elena's room at 2:14 a.m. No scheduled medication. She remained inside for 6 minutes, left carrying nothing. Angelica rewound. Zoomed. Marta adjusted the IV line. Thomas watched without speaking. Why at that hour? Angelica murmured. Thomas's jaw hardened. She shouldn't have. They moved to footage from the medication cabinet, Marta accessing it alone repeatedly. Angelica noticed something else. A subtle habit. Before preparing Elena's tray, Marta would check her phone. Not casual glances. Intent. She was receiving instructions. Can you pull phone logs? Angelica asked. Yes. Thomas made a call immediately. Orders issued. Efficient. Silent. Angelica leaned back slightly. This isn't impulsive, she said quietly. It's structured. By whom? She watched Marta on the screen. Someone internal. Thomas didn't need clarification. Family, board member, trusted ally. The most dangerous threats lived inside walls. Near midnight, lab results arrived digitally. Thomas opened them beside Angelica. Serum digoxin level, elevated beyond therapeutic range. Not drastically, but dangerously high. Angelica closed her eyes briefly. She's been overdosed, slowly, she said. Thomas's hand clenched into a fist. His voice when he spoke was low and steady. Proof. Strong evidence. Enough? Enough to confront. Not enough to convict. He stood. Then we confront. Angelica grabbed his wrist. Not yet. His eyes flashed. Instinct to act. She'll destroy evidence. She doesn't know we know. You're asking me to let someone continue harming my mother. I'm asking you to let her think she's winning. Silence. Then a shift. Thomas exhaled slowly. Explain. Angelica leaned forward. We swap the medication. Replace with saline. Monitor her reaction. If Marta adjusts dosage again without change in symptoms, she reveals intent. And if she notices, she won't. You're certain? No. He almost smiled at that. Honesty. Do it, he said. The next morning, the trap began. Angelica stood beside Marta as the medication was prepared. She watched every movement, every measurement, every glance. Marta's hands were steady, professional. But Angelica saw the smallest tremor when she handed over the cup. Angelica accidentally knocked the tray. Oh, I'm sorry. Liquid spilled. Apologies exchanged. Angelica insisted on remaking it. Under her supervision, saline substituted. Dose reduced quietly. They waited. Hours passed. Elena remained stable. No nausea, no confusion, no arrhythmia spikes. Marta watched carefully. Her brow furrowed once, then she left the room. Angelica followed quietly down the hall. Marta entered a side office, closed the door. Angelica moved silently closer. She heard it this time. Levels are inconsistent. Pause. No, she doesn't suspect yet. Pause. Yes, he still believes her. Angelica's breath slowed. He. Not Thomas. Someone else. Marta's voice lowered further. You promised the trust would transfer immediately. Trust. Estate trust. Angelica stepped back silently. The conspiracy was larger than medication. It was inheritance, control, power. She returned to Elena's room calmly. Thomas was already there. He read her face instantly. She called someone, Angelica said. Who? She mentioned a trust transfer. Thomas's eyes darkened. My uncle manages the family trust. Silence. And he's been pressing me to formalize succession, he added slowly. Angelica met his gaze. There's your motive. Thomas stood very still. The room felt colder. He did not rage. He did not shout. He simply nodded once. Tonight, he said quietly, we end this. Angelica felt the weight of what that meant. Violence. Retaliation. Blood. She stepped in front of him slightly. No. No killing, she said. He attempted to murder my mother. And you'll prove it. Publicly. Financially. Legally. You think the law protects men like him? No, she replied. But exposure destroys them. A long silence. Then Thomas did something no one in this house had likely seen. He paused and listened. Before proof was complete, before rage consumed, he listened. Then we gather everything, he said finally. Angelica nodded. Invisible power had disrupted the moral order of the House of Wolves. Now it was time to drag truth into light. And someone upstairs had no idea the Queen of Quiet was already rewriting the board. The estate did not sleep. It only dimmed. By midnight, the hallways were empty. Lights softened to a muted gold. Security rotated shifts in disciplined silence. Outside, wind brushed across the manicured hedges like a whisper that didn't dare linger. Inside the surveillance room, Angelica stood beside Thomas as monitors flickered quietly. On one screen, Elena sleeping peacefully, breath steady. On another, Marta exiting her quarters. She's moving, Angelica said softly. Thomas didn't answer. He was already watching. Marta walked with purpose, not toward the main corridor, but toward the East Wing office rarely used at night. She won't use her room again, Angelica murmured. Not after the lab results. Thomas's jaw tightened. He had confronted no one yet. He had said nothing about the elevated levels. He had simply told Marta that new lab protocols would begin. She had nodded, smiled. Invisible wolves learned quickly. She thinks she still has time, Angelica continued. Thomas looked at her. You're certain it's her? She's confident, and confidence leaves trails. Marta unlocked the office door and slipped inside. Angelica zoomed the camera feed. There, the faint glow of a phone screen. She's calling him, Angelica whispered. Thomas made a gesture to Luca, who stood behind them. Trace the outgoing call, Thomas ordered quietly. Luca moved swiftly to a side console. Seconds ticked. The silence was electric. Angelica's pulse did not quicken. She focused on Marta's body language, the slight forward lean, the tightening of shoulders. No, he's unaware. Marta's voice crackled faintly through directional audio. Thomas's eyes hardened. Yes, I adjusted again tonight. Angelica froze. Adjusted, despite the saline swap. She doesn't know we replaced it, Angelica breathed. If levels drop too fast, suspicion increases. Thomas's fist clenched slowly. Marta continued. The trust transfer must finalize before month's end. Luca looked up from the console. Call traced, he said. Registered to a shell company linked to... He paused. Thomas didn't blink. Say it. Your uncle, Vittorio. Silence descended like a blade. Angelica felt the air change. Vittorio Vercetti, senior partner in the family's legitimate holdings. Executor of the estate trust. Public philanthropist. Private strategist. The internal villain had revealed himself. Thomas stood very still. He did not shout. He did not curse. He simply said, "Bring him." But Angelica stepped in front of him. No. Thomas's eyes dropped to her. Move! Not like this, she said firmly. He tried to kill my mother. Yes, and he expects you to react violently. A pause. He wants you unstable, Angelica continued. He wants the board to question your leadership. Thomas's breathing slowed. You're asking me to wait. I'm asking you to win. His gaze searched hers. You think I can't handle my own family. I think you've handled them with force your entire life, she replied. This time, use exposure. Silence stretched. Behind them, Marta ended the call and exited the office. Thomas looked back at the monitor, then at Angelica. Fine, he said finally. We gather everything. The plan formed quickly. Financial records, medication purchase logs, phone transcripts, trust documents. Angelica spent the next hours cross-referencing timestamps. Invisible skill revealed itself. She mapped correlations between medication adjustments and financial activity within the trust. Each increase in dosage aligned with subtle fund reallocations. Vittorio had been preparing to declare Elena mentally unfit. The elevated digoxin levels would explain cognitive confusion. With her deemed incompetent, the trust would temporarily shift management to him. Angelica leaned back slowly. He wasn't killing her immediately, she said. Thomas looked at her. He was destabilizing her. Angelica nodded. Slow decline. Quiet. Just enough to trigger legal transfer. Thomas's voice turned colder. He underestimated one variable. Angelica met his gaze. She didn't die. No, he said softly. He underestimated you. The next evening, Vittorio Vercetti arrived at the estate. He came dressed impeccably, silver hair slicked back, cane polished. Smile rehearsed. He kissed Elena's cheek gently. My dear sister-in-law, he said warmly. You look radiant. Elena smiled faintly. Angelica stood beside the bed, silent. Thomas watched everything. Dinner was served formally. Long table, polished silver, controlled atmosphere. Vittorio spoke of charitable events, market fluctuations, succession planning. Then he glanced casually at Thomas. We should discuss the trust transfer before month's end, he said lightly. Given Elena's fragile condition, we must prepare. Angelica watched Thomas's hand tighten around his glass. Elena's gaze sharpened. My condition seems improved, she said calmly. Vittorio smiled. Temporary fluctuations are common. Angelica set down her fork. Her latest labs show therapeutic levels, she said evenly. Vittorio turned toward her slowly. And you are? Angelica, Thomas replied before she could. My fiancée. Vittorio's eyes assessed her briefly. How delightful. Angelica did not smile. Her cognitive clarity has improved significantly, she continued, which suggests previous dosage adjustments may have been excessive. A beat! Vittorio sipped his wine. I trust Dr. Romano's expertise. So do I, Angelica said, which is why it's concerning that adjustments occurred without updated labs. Silence. Thomas watched. Elena watched. Vittorio's smile thinned slightly. Are you accusing someone? He asked softly. Angelica held his gaze. I'm stating medical facts. Thomas set his glass down. Marta? He said calmly. The door opened. Marta entered. Perfect posture. Controlled expression. Yes, sir. Thomas's voice was level. Explain the dosage adjustments. Marta hesitated. Doctor's orders. Angelica stepped forward. Dr. Romano denies issuing increase without labs. Marta's eyes flickered, just briefly. Vittorio's fingers tightened around his cane. Enough theatrics, he said lightly. This is absurd. Thomas stood. The room temperature seemed to drop. Play the recording, he ordered. Luca entered silently with a tablet, Marta's voice. Yes, I adjusted again tonight. The trust transfer must finalize. Silence. The recording ended. Marta went pale. Vittorio's face remained controlled. You misunderstand context, he said calmly. Angelica stepped closer. Then clarify it. He turned his gaze to her. You presume much for someone newly arrived. I presume patterns, she replied quietly. And motive. Thomas spoke then. My mother will undergo independent review tomorrow. Vittorio's eyes hardened. You would humiliate family publicly? Thomas's voice did not rise. You attempted to poison her quietly. Silence exploded across the table. Elena rose slowly from her chair. Her voice, though aged, carried iron. I built this family beside your father, she said to Vittorio, and I will not be dismantled by you. Vittorio stood as well. You have no proof of intent. Angelica stepped forward. Phone records, financial reallocations, lab results. We have enough for investigation. Vittorio's gaze snapped to Thomas. You would invite authorities into our affairs? Thomas held his stare. Yes. The word fell heavy. It was not violence. It was exposure. Power kneeling to truth. Vittorio's composure finally cracked. You're naive, he spat. This world doesn't forgive weakness. Thomas stepped closer. No, he said softly. It doesn't forgive betrayal. Luca moved toward Marta. She trembled now. I only followed instructions, she whispered. Vittorio shot her a look of fury, and that was enough. The mask had fallen. Thomas signaled security. No one leaves. Phones confiscated. Lawyers contacted. Not assassins. Lawyers? Angelica felt the shift in the room. The old world expected blood. Instead, it received light. Hours later, Vittorio sat confined in the estate study under guard. Marta wept quietly in another room. Elena rested peacefully upstairs. Thomas stood alone on the balcony overlooking the dark grounds. Angelica joined him. He didn't look at her. You changed the outcome, he said quietly. No, she replied. You did. I would have shot him. I know. Silence. Wind brushed across stone. I almost did, he admitted, but you didn't. He turned toward her slowly. For you. Angelica felt the weight of that. I didn't ask you to do it for me, she said gently. I know. A pause. I did it because you were right. Their eyes met. No contract, no transaction. Just recognition the moral order of the House of Wolves had been disrupted. And Thomas had chosen reform over rage. But war within families never ended quietly. This was only the first fracture. And someone else, somewhere in the city, was already calculating the fallout. The news did not break publicly. Not yet. Families like the Vercettis did not implode in headlines. They contained explosions behind stone walls. but tension travels faster than press releases. By morning, 3 captains had called Thomas under the guise of checking on Elena's health. By noon, 2 board members had postponed scheduled meetings. By evening, Luca reported unusual movement around one of the family's legitimate warehouse properties. Someone was nervous. Someone was testing the perimeter. Angelica stood at the long dining table reviewing documents Thomas had brought up from the study. Trust agreements, property transfers, shell companies. Patterns emerged quickly. Vittorio hadn't acted alone. He had positioned himself to assume control of the charitable trust. But that trust was tied to a broader restructuring of the Vercetti holdings. If Elena were declared incompetent, emergency clauses would activate. Those clauses would shift not just money, but authority, board votes, operational control, decision rights. Thomas had been targeted strategically. Removing your mother destabilizes governance, Angelica said quietly. Thomas leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Yes. And destabilizing governance invites challenges. Yes. From within. Always from within, she exhaled slowly. This isn't over. No, Thomas agreed. Luca entered without knocking, something he never did unless necessary. Boss, he said sharply, we have a problem. Thomas's eyes lifted. Speak. Your nephew, Marco. He didn't show up to school this afternoon. Silence. Angelica looked between them. Marco? Elena's grandson? Thomas's sister's son? 12 years old. Thomas stood instantly. Explain. Driver arrived for pickup. School claims Marco left with someone claiming to be family. Thomas's expression went still. Too still. Security footage? Angelica's mind moved quickly. Who has authority to collect him? She asked. Only immediate family, Luca replied. Vittorio? She pressed. He's confined. His associates? Thomas grabbed his phone. Lock down the estate, he ordered. Double perimeter. Then he turned to Angelica. Stay here. No. His eyes hardened. This is not negotiable. Neither is a child's safety, she shot back. A beat. Whoever took Marco, she continued calmly, wants leverage. That means they want you controlled, not dead, which means he's alive. Thomas stared at her. Probability analysis? He asked quietly. Yes. Silence. Continue, he said. They want you destabilized. A kidnapping triggers emotional reaction, rash decisions, violent retaliation. Thomas's jaw tightened. You're suggesting this is strategic? Yes. Luca's phone buzzed. He looked down. Footage incoming. They moved quickly to the surveillance room. The school camera feed flickered onto the large screen. Marco exiting the building. Smiling. Relaxed. A man approached. Well-dressed. Confident. Marco nodded and followed him. Angelica leaned closer. Zoom. Luca did. The man's face became clearer. Angelica's stomach dropped. I've seen him before, she said. Thomas's head turned sharply. Where? In the background of the medication supplier's records. Silence. Linked to Vittorio? Thomas asked. Yes. The puzzle snapped into place. They escalated, Luca muttered. Thomas's expression darkened. They want me to negotiate. Angelica crossed her arms slowly. No, she said. Thomas looked at her. They want you reactive. Silence. Call Vittorio, she added. Thomas's gaze sharpened. He's confined. Then let him talk. Vittorio was escorted into the surveillance room. He looked older now, more brittle, but not afraid. What have you done? Thomas demanded. Vittorio sighed. Always so dramatic. Where is Marco? Vittorio tilted his head slightly. You assume I know. Angelica stepped forward. You coordinated medication manipulation through external contacts. Those same contacts appear in school footage. Vittorio's eyes flicked to her. Impressive. Answer the question, Thomas said. Vittorio smiled faintly. Your problem, Thomas, is that you assume loyalty where there is none. Thomas moved closer. Luca stepped in subtly. Not to restrain Thomas, but to monitor. Marco is unharmed, Vittorio said calmly. For now. The words chilled the room. Why? Thomas asked. Because power vacuums invite predators, Vittorio replied. You've shown weakness. I exposed treachery. You invited scrutiny. Angelica's voice cut through. And you invited felony charges. Vittorio's eyes narrowed. You're out of your depth. Am I? She asked quietly. You destabilized internal structure before consolidating support. Now factions test your strength. Thomas remained still. You orchestrated this to force negotiation, he said. Vittorio's smile returned. I orchestrated nothing. I merely observed opportunities. Angelica stepped closer. You miscalculated something. Vittorio arched a brow. What? She isn't dead? Silence. And because she isn't dead, Angelica continued, you don't control the narrative. Thomas's eyes flickered with understanding. Release Marco, he said quietly. Vittorio shrugged. I don't control every ambitious man in this city. Angelica studied his face. He wasn't lying. Not fully. This was ripple effect. Vittorio's attempted coup had signaled instability. Other factions moved. Thomas inhaled slowly. Trace the man from the footage, he ordered Luca, already running facial recognition. Angelica leaned toward Thomas. They'll contact you. He nodded once. Then we prepare. The call came an hour later. Blocked number. Thomas answered on speaker. You move quickly, a distorted voice said. Where is the boy? Thomas asked calmly. Safe. Comfortable. What do you want? Stability. Angelica listened carefully to tone. Not frantic, not violent. Measured. You fear instability, Thomas said. I fear reckless leadership. Silence. You exposed family publicly. Investors question confidence. This isn't about my nephew, Thomas said. It's about control. A small chuckle. Release Vittorio. Angelica's eyes widened slightly. Thomas did not hesitate. No. A pause. You choose pride over blood? No. Thomas replied steadily. I choose law. Silence. Angelica leaned closer. Offer neutral ground, she whispered. Thomas continued smoothly. You want stability. So do I. We meet. Public location. Child released first. You're in no position to negotiate. You're in no position to kill him, Thomas replied quietly, because if he's harmed, every faction in this city unites against you. Silence stretched long. The voice returned softer. Midnight, Harbor Warehouse 12. The line went dead. Thomas turned immediately to Luca. Mobilize. Angelica stepped forward. I'm coming. No. His gaze softened slightly. This is not a boardroom, he said quietly. It's exactly that, she replied. Only the stakes are higher. A long pause, then he nodded once. Stay behind me. She met his eyes steadily. I don't hide. He almost smiled. I know. Midnight. Warehouse 12 loomed over dark water. Security positioned discreetly. Thomas stepped forward alone. Angelica 10 paces behind. The warehouse doors creaked open. Marco sat tied to a chair, unharmed, but frightened. 3 men stood nearby. The man from the footage stepped forward. You're brave, he said. Thomas's voice remained level. Release the boy. The man hesitated. Angelica stepped forward slightly. Your leverage dissolves once he's harmed, she said calmly. You know that. The man studied her. You're the waitress, and you're predictable. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. You don't want war, Angelica continued. You want assurance. His lips curved faintly. I already contacted the university. Her eyes widened slightly. You assumed. I prepared. Then I'll finish nursing school, she said. And consult this empire part-time, he added quietly. She almost laughed. You're impossible. Only occasionally. Silence softened into something warmer. Not rushed, not fevered, earned. The trial of the house had ended, not with blood, with accountability. The wolves had been confronted, the rot exposed, the dynasty altered. Invisible power had disrupted corruption. Moral disruption had forced reform. Now ascension loomed. Not into dominance, into dignity. But one final decision remained. Angelica's. The morning after the verdict felt unfamiliar. Not because the estate was quiet. It had always been quiet. But because the silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt breathable. Angelica woke before sunrise, as she always had. Old habits did not dissolve simply because marble replaced cracked tile. She dressed in simple clothes and slipped downstairs to the gardens. Dew clung to the hedges like fragile glass. For the first time since stepping into this world, she stood alone without listening for threats. No raised voices, no whispered phone calls, no moral calculations vibrating under the surface. Just mourning. Thomas found her there. He didn't interrupt her immediately. He stood a few steps away, watching her examine a rosebush that had begun to bloom again after weeks of neglect. "You're thinking about leaving," he said quietly. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't fear. It was understanding. Angelica didn't look at him yet. "I'm thinking about choosing," she replied. A long pause. He stepped closer. "Are those the same?" "No." She turned then, meeting his gaze fully. "Leaving is reaction. Choosing is intention." He nodded slowly. "You've fulfilled your agreement," he said. "I know. You don't owe me. I know. And if you walk away, I won't stop you." That mattered. More than wealth, more than promises, choice. Angelica studied his face carefully. He looked tired. Not from conflict, from transformation. "You're rebuilding something," she said softly. "Yes, and that won't be easy." "No." Silence stretched gently between them. "I don't want to stay because I'm grateful," she said. "I don't want you to. I don't want to stay because I'm impressed. I wouldn't trust that." A faint smile flickered. "I would stay because I believe this structure can become something better." He searched her expression. "And do you?" "Yes." The words settled between them like an anchor. Later that afternoon, Elena summoned Angelica to the sitting room. The matriarch was dressed sharply, posture straight, eyes clear. "You are deciding," Elena said. "Yes." "Good." Angelica raised an eyebrow slightly. "You approve either way?" "I approve strength," Elena replied. "Not dependency." Angelica sat across from her. "When you first met me, you saw prey," Angelica said quietly. Elena's lips curved faintly. "Yes. And now? I see equilibrium." Angelica held her gaze. "If I stay, it will not be as decoration. I would expect nothing less. And I will not inherit fear." Elena's eyes sharpened. "You cannot erase fear from this world." "No." Angelica agreed. "But I can refuse to perpetuate it." Silence. Then Elena nodded once. "Then stay." It wasn't command. It was blessing. The final conversation happened that evening in the study. No witnesses. No audience. Thomas stood by the window. Angelica closed the door behind her. "I've decided," she said. Did he turn immediately? "I'm listening. I'll stay." "But," she continued, he faced her. "Say it. Recognition without spectacle. Respect without ownership. Power kneeling, not in humiliation, but in acknowledgement." After the gala ended and staff began dismantling tables, Thomas and Angelica walked the now quiet grounds. The night air felt lighter. "You didn't name me," she said softly. "You don't need titles," he replied. She stopped walking. "Be careful." He turned. "Of what?" "Of tying reform to me personally. Why? If I become symbol, they attack the symbol." "Silence. You're right," he said. I prefer structural change, she continued. Not personality change. He nodded slowly. I'm still learning. Yes. And you're patient. Only because you're trying. They reached the edge of the reflecting pool. Water mirrored the lights above. Thomas turned toward her fully. I have something for you, he said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. I told you. No transactional gestures. He almost smiled. It's not that. He handed her a folder. Inside, University confirmation of tuition fully funded, but not by Vercetti Holdings. Anonymous endowment. She looked up. You did this. I facilitated it. I could have handled loans. I know. Silence. I didn't do it to bind you, he said softly. I did it to remove obstacles. She studied his face carefully. No leverage, no expectation, just support. That's different, she admitted. Yes. Weeks later, Angelica stood in a hospital ward during her clinical rotation. An elderly woman lay confused, misdiagnosed. Angelica noticed the error immediately. She intervened, corrected the dosage, stabilized the patient. A junior nurse whispered afterward, You catch things others miss. Angelica smiled faintly. I don't ignore them. Still working. That evening, Thomas sat alone in his study, reviewing compliance reports. He paused, closed the folder, and walked downstairs to find her. Not because something was wrong, but because partnership had become instinct. He found her at the kitchen table, textbooks open. You look exhausted, he said. I am. He pulled out a chair beside her. Then let me cook. She laughed softly. You? I'm capable. He moved awkwardly through the kitchen, far from elegant in that space. Angelica watched, amused. You're terrible at chopping, she said. I negotiate contracts, not vegetables. She stepped behind him, adjusting his grip gently. Like this, their hands brushed. No urgency, no drama. Just shared space. Power in the simplest form, mutuality. Later that night, as they sat quietly together, Thomas spoke. I used to believe control meant never bending. And now? She asked. Now I think bending prevents breaking. She leaned against the back of her chair. That's growth. He met her eyes. You didn't kneel to me. No. You made me kneel to something better. Silence. Truth, she said softly. Yes. The house of Vercetti no longer stood as fortress of fear. It stood as structure under revision. Not perfect, not pure, but conscious. And in the center of that evolution stood a woman who once carried 3 plates at once while calculating tips in her head. Invisible power had not seized a throne. It had redefined it. But ascension requires final reckoning. One last test remained. Not external, internal. Reform creates enemies, but growth creates temptation. 6 months after the trial, after the gala, after the restructuring stabilized into something that felt almost sustainable, a new offer arrived. It came discreetly. A black envelope. No return address. Delivered directly to Thomas's private desk. Inside was a proposal, a merger opportunity, a multinational logistics corporation seeking a strategic partnership. On paper, it was legitimate, profitable, expansive, a doorway into global markets. But Angelica noticed what others didn't. The footnotes, the subcontractors, the shell entities embedded beneath the surface. She sat across from Thomas in the study as he reviewed the document. It triples annual revenue, Luca said from the side of the room. It restores influence. Thomas didn't respond immediately. He looked at Angelica. What do you see? She ran her finger lightly down the margins. Front company routing, Luca frowned. It's a holding pattern. No, Angelica replied calmly. It's insulation. For what? Thomas asked quietly. For operations you've been dismantling. Silence. The room felt familiar. A fork in the road. Again. Thomas leaned back in his chair. They approached us. Luca said, Not the other way around. That's what worries me, Angelica replied. Thomas studied the contract again. Explain. The offer restores leverage without direct accountability, she said. You gain revenue while plausible deniability absorbs risk. That was our old structure, Luca said. Yes. Silence. And it works, Luca added. Angelica met his gaze. It works until it collapses. Thomas's eyes shifted between them. What's the downside? He asked quietly. You become dependent again, Angelica said. On shadow channels. And the upside? Later, as they stood once more on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Thomas spoke softly. You saved my mother. Yes. You exposed betrayal. Yes. You restructured an empire. No, she corrected gently. You chose to. He looked at her carefully. You always say that. Because it matters. Silence. You never wanted power, he said. No. And yet you changed it. She leaned slightly against the railing. Power changes when someone refuses to fear it. He reached for her hand. And if it tries to corrupt me again? She met his gaze. I remind you. And if I don't listen, I walk. He smiled softly. That's why I will. Choice. Always choice. In the months that followed, the Vercetti estate opened its gates for community health clinics twice a month. Angelica completed her nursing degree with honors. Thomas attended the ceremony quietly in the back row. No spectacle. Just pride. When her name was called, she didn't look for applause. She looked for him. And he nodded once. Respect, not ownership. Elena eventually stepped down formally from oversight. Not in weakness. In satisfaction. This house will endure, she told Angelica privately. Not because of fear, but because of balance. Angelica smiled. That was always the goal. The final image of the House of Vercetti was not marble or iron gates. It was a garden at dusk. Children from the neighborhood running across trimmed grass during a scholarship celebration. Staff laughing openly, Thomas speaking quietly with community leaders. Angelica kneeling beside a little girl who had scraped her knee, cleaning the wound gently. Invisible, precise, grounded. The most powerful thing in the room. Epilogue, a reflection. Power is loud when it fears collapse. It is quiet when it trusts itself. Angelica never sought a throne. She sought integrity. Thomas never expected to kneel. He expected obedience. But obedience built fear. And fear built rot. Truth disrupted it. Choice rebuilt it. Silence is not weakness until morality demands speech. Loyalty is not declared. It is demonstrated. And love is not possession. It is partnership. In the end, the empire did not fall. It evolved. Because one invisible woman refused to stay silent. And one powerful man chose to listen. If this story moved you, if you believe power should answer to truth, then subscribe and stay with us for the next journey. More stories of courage, quiet strength, and the moments that change everything are coming soon.